Tough. It was tough, yeah.
Okay, well, pray for Jeff. It's been a tough week.
I was batting 1,000 till recently. Hey, good to be with you. As Scott said, I'm Jeff. I'm the youth pastor here at Peace Portal. I'm really thankful to be a part of that team. Isabel, who is leading worship, is our youth worship director, and Christine that spoke last week, our junior high director. We have a wonderful team of people that lead our young people in this church. And so what a thrill to open the Bible and spend time with you. And as Scott said, we're in this series about looking at mistakes of the past. And I don't know about you, my preference is to learn from your mistakes and not my own. I prefer not to make them, even though I do. It's much easier to learn and objectively learn from other people's mistakes than it is your own. So as we look at the Old Testament, we're looking at the book of 1 Kings, and we're looking at the idea of who are the voices that we're listening to, and if we're listening to the wrong voices, who is shaping our lives, and that is in a multitude of ways. And so let's set the stage, get ourselves set up for the text this morning, and we'll have some fun along the way, as I always try and do. So we all know, most of us would know Solomon. He wrote the book of Proverbs, right? So the wisdom literature, most famously known for his leadership, his wisdom, and the book of Proverbs. And he has just died leading into this part. His start to his leadership was strong. He led a life that was good and godly. He pursued the right things and righteousness. He was seeking godly wisdom. He was imparting godly wisdom, and he was writing godly wisdom for us in a way that we still learn from it today. But his finish to his life was not the same. He is a cautionary tale that a strong start to any of our lives does not guarantee a strong finish. And the finish of his life was marked by a very different set of characteristics, and the arc of his leadership and life were different than probably the one that we celebrate the most. He was a man that had been known for his faith in God. He began to worship idols, and a gracious, godly leader had become cruel, heavy-handed, and he had traded humility for pride. That is how he marked towards the end of his life. He'd begun to work his people hard, introduce oppressive taxation to pay for massive building projects like the temple and his very own palace. His people were tired, they were resentful, and they were tired and resentful towards him. And it was because of Solomon's unfaithfulness to God, in the fact that he turned on his people, he turned to worshiping idols, took many wives, all of these things, that God said to him in 1 Kings 11 that he was going to split the kingdom. But because Solomon's father was David, and God had made a covenant with David, that he would not allow the lineage of David to break in leadership. So he said, I'm not going to split the kingdom up while Solomon's alive. But as soon as he passes and there's a new king, boom, we're splitting up the kingdom. God promised David that his throne would be established forever through his descendants. And God kept his promise. And he said this, 1 Kings 11, 12 to 13. There's some text that isn't up on the screen, so I'm just going to read it to you. Trust me, it's here. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, this is God speaking, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give it to one tribe for the sake of David my servant and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. And so this is a bit of the background leading into what we're going to read today. Solomon died after a 40-year reign as king, and his son Rehoboam is stepping into a leadership role. And his son has watched his father, and most acutely watched the end of his father's leadership. And he's watched the arc of his life and known about an arc of going from a godly, righteous man to a selfish, prideful, cruel man. He's watched it all. He's watched his father. He's familiar with the wisdom literature that we have in the book of Proverbs in our Bible. And you would hope that watching his father's demise and his legacy get tarnished would shape his decision to be the leader that his father was when he was younger. And spoiler alert, it doesn't. He ends up making the wrong choice. So this is where we begin in chapter 12. Rehoboam is traveling to a place called Shechem for his coronation. He's going to become the king. Solomon's son is now going to become the king after his father dies. And it's just interesting to note that this place that was chosen had historical value to the many tribes of Israel. And it was probably chosen as a means by which to maybe create more unity by having the meeting in a place that is rich in history. The people seeing this opportunity, God's people, were led by a guy named Jeroboam. So we got the king Rehoboam. Jeroboam, very close names. Rehoboam's the king. Jeroboam is a guy who had been kind of kicked out of the kingdom because he had tried repeatedly to rebel against the cruelty of Solomon. And he'd been chased out to Egypt. Now Solomon's dead. He's like, boom, it's time to come back. He rallies everybody and says to the king, they want to make an appeal that he would lead with kindness, graciousness, And now he's there. He wants to talk to Solomon, or talk to Solomon's son Rehoboam about the unfair treatment of his people and wants to advocate for a different way of being. And so he does that. He says this in chapter 12, verse 4, lighten the harsh labor and heavy taxes that Solomon imposed and we'll serve you. He says he's offering them loyalty. If you treat us the way that he treated us before, we'll follow you. We will be in your kingdom. We will submit to your leadership. And I think it's a pretty simple request. And Rehoboam hears the pleadings of his people and wisely seeks counsel and agrees to come back in a couple days with a new decision. And for each of us, when we say, I'm gonna seek advice on an issue, I wanna talk to some people about this, it is actually a step of humility. It is an admission that you and I don't have all the pieces, that we are gonna potentially give people outside of ourselves authority to say, you're wrong, you're right, here's my thoughts, that might have an objective view of the thing that you're talking about, might have information that you don't have, might have a perspective that you have not yet gained. There's something good about asking for outside help, but the voices that you choose to listen to are so vital. And we're gonna talk about the voices we listen to. So now, we're in chapter 12. So we got Rehoboam going to Shechem, where Israel gathered, and Jeroboam heard of this. He returned from Egypt, for he'd fled to Egypt to escape King Solomon. The leaders of Israel summoned him, and the whole assembly of Israel went to speak with the king. Your father was a hard master, they said. Lighten the harsh labor and demands the heavy taxes that your father imposed on us, and we'll be your loyal subjects. And he says, give me 3 days to think it over, and then come back for my answer. The king Rehoboam discussed the matter with older men who had counseled his father Solomon, who had also seen this character arc of going from a good guy to a really bad guy. They'd seen it all. And he asked them, how should I answer these people? And the older counselors replied, if you're willing to be a servant to these people, if you're willing to be a king that serves them, later in the Bible we learn about a king that comes to serve and not be served. That's Jesus. The older counselor replies, if you are willing to be a servant to these people today and give them a favorable answer, they will always be, it'll come back on in a sec, don't worry. Your loyal subjects, there it is. This happens sometimes. So the older counselor replied, if you're willing to be a servant to these people, which is a posture differential from them being an authoritarian leader that Solomon was, taxing them heavily, working them hard, but actually to say, if you become a leader that is a servant leader that serves your people, they will be loyal to you. So now we arrive at the text for today, which is 1 Kings chapter 12, verses 8 to 14. Here's what it says. But Rehoboam rejected the advice of the older men. Instead, he asked for the opinion of the young men who'd grown up around him and were now his advisors. Red flag. What is your advice, he asked them. How should I treat these people who want me to lighten their burdens imposed by my father? The young men replied, this is what you should tell those complainers who want a lighter burden. My finger is thicker than my father's waist. Yes, my father laid heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions. What a charming guy. Sounds like he'd be a wonderful boss. I don't know. These elders had walked with Solomon. They'd experienced a long view of his leadership. They saw Solomon's life and God's growing dissatisfaction with how Solomon was leading. I mean, God was not quiet about what he thought about how Solomon was leading. And their counsel was to be a leader that was servant-hearted. If you serve these people today, they will be your loyal followers. And the older men encouraged a leadership focused on serving people and not themselves, about serving the needs of the people where their flourishing would ultimately lead to the kingdom flourishing. That if he was a leader that had the view that helping his people win would help everybody win and help himself win. But here's the thing. The truth was, much like many of us in our own lives, Rehoboam wasn't probably looking for advice. He actually probably just wanted someone to green light the idea that he already had. Because he had found great advantage in the leadership style of his father. His father was taxing people heavily. They were building a beautiful palace. Holding people down harshly meant more for him. And so for him going and asking the elders answer of relinquishing that, surrendering, having a posture where he would serve instead of being served, was probably not the answer he was looking for. He disregarded wisdom that came from experience, humility, and perspective, instead embraced the confirmation of the choice that he'd already made. But every one of us has a sphere of influence. If I went out to each of you today and I said, who do you listen to? What are the podcasts you listen to? What are the books you're listening to? I would say probably every single one of you, if we had a conversation, would tell me about something I'd never heard of before. If I told you that I listen to quite a few podcasts, there's only one I pay money for. And this might not surprise you. It's called Podcast The Ride. It is a comedy podcast about theme parks. And I love it. It's my thing I do when I'm driving in the car, when the kids aren't there. They sometimes say bad words. And I just love, these guys are my age. Their comedy is so related to me. I feel like I'm on the bullseye of the target demographic. Same as when I walk into Cactus Club. They play music from when I thought I was cool. It's kind of that zone of my life. And so I like being the target demographic, so I go, but I would tell you, podcasts, right? You're like, huh, what are you talking about? You would have never heard of it. And you might tell me about a thing that you listen to, a person you listen to. We all have our spheres. We have these circles that we draw around ourselves of influence. And some of us choose a lot of things to listen to, some choose less. When I talk to our small group leaders at Journey, I say, hey, there are voices in all of our lives that we have to listen to. When I think of our students, I'm gonna point over here at some of our students over here. There's voices that you have to listen to. You have to listen to your teachers, you have to listen to the police, you have to listen to the border guards, you have to listen to your mom and dad. These are things about being young. But there's voices that you give weight to, that you opt into influence. You opt into influence with your friends. You might opt to influence with your friends' families. But for our youth leaders, I say they are opting into your influence. So therefore, you have a very potent and powerful voice in the life of a young person. That they would choose to listen to you. They would seek you for wisdom. So to know, as our friend Spider-Man says, with great power comes great responsibility. And if you've got power to influence, there's great responsibility to do so. There's no mention of Spider-Man in the Bible, just in case you're like, I wonder if it's in there. No mention. And so some of you have so many influences. And some of you, your worldview might be really narrow, and you might miss out on a whole branch of the world that exists. Sometimes because I'm in youth ministry, my wife's not, I'll bring up something that the young people are into, and my wife will say, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, it was on Instagram. She's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, Jeff. And I was like, okay, well, I'll show it to you. And I send her reels and reels and reels so she can keep up on the world. But I'm gonna tell you a story. This story is entirely true. It blew my mind, but I have to share it with you. I couldn't keep it to myself. I was in Toronto this week for meetings with my job at the national office. And so I was meeting with some of my colleagues that work at the national office for the Alliance. When I say Toronto, I really mean Mississauga. It's like I went all the way, going to Vancouver and never leaving Richmond. So I went to the airport, I stayed by the airport, I slept by the airport, and I left from the airport. It was the first time in my life I checked in for my return flight while walking out of the airport from my arrival. It was a very grim situation. But I had a day of meetings, and one of my colleagues shared this story. And this is to communicate that there might be a whole part of the world you don't know exists. So he was telling me the story about his son, and his wife were out for a drive. And she's driving, she's in the passenger seat, or they're in the car, I don't remember. Actually, I think she was driving and the son was in the passenger seat. And she says, what's that car in front of us? What kind of car is that? It's got a T on it. He says, Mom, that's a Tesla. She says, oh, is that a new company? He's like, well, no, they're like an electric car company, kind of made successful by this guy named Elon Musk. And, they're kind of popular. There's a lot of them around. She's like, oh, yeah, you know what? Maybe I've seen these before. And she said, Elon. She said, Elon. When I was in university, I had a roommate in my first year of university named Elon. What'd you say his last name was? Musk, yeah, I think that was his name. And he's like, come on. And she says, well, what do you know about the guy? Well, he was South African, came to Queens where I was studying, and I lived in a house with these 4 other people. And he says, here's a picture of him. Is that him? Yeah, that's him. What's he up to? She was roommates with the richest man in the world currently, and she had not kept up with anything that he was doing. She just was happily going on with her life. He was at Queens for 2 years, totally verified story, and they lived in a house together. And she was like, it was just a normal, hey, he was one of the people. When you go to university, you share a house with a bunch of people. There's 5 of them living in the house. He happened to be one of them. What's he up to? Well, that was probably a long catch-up. But the truth is, there are things that are going on in our world. There are spheres of influence and information that you are completely unaware of. Whether or not I try and be someone that's very well read, I try and know what's going on in the world, and yet I'm continually surprised when I see things. The spheres of influence that we choose to make in our lives are shaping us. The news we watch, the podcasts we listen to, the music we listen to, the churches we attend, the pastors we listen to, the friends that we spend time with, the values that our friends espouse, all of those things, the person you're married to, the people that you choose to do life with, all of it is shaping you. All of them are potent in influencing you. For Rehoboam, he was deeply influenced by his peers, but here's what you need to know. They were like him. They grew up in privilege. If your dad's the king, you're only hanging around people that should be hanging around the king. Like, you had to know somebody. You had to be somebody. They were raised in affluence and privilege, and they were raised around with power and likely pride. What they stand to gain from their friend, if your friend's becoming the king and he says, I want to give it all away, you're like, hey man, that's a bad idea. Do you know how rich we're gonna be if you continue to keep going the way your dad was going? That's good for us and the homies here. Like, we want this to be a thing. We want to be around the powerful king. And so their advice to him was not rooted in, hey, I wonder what's best for everybody. I wonder what the right, thoughtful, deep, wise answer is. It's like, oh, this would be good for us, for you to continue doing that. They wanted more of the same that they were used to. Were Rehoboam's friends' opinions, were they aligned with God? No. Clearly, because God was dissatisfied with Solomon's way of leading, and his son, who's now the king, was about to do the exact same thing. And God made it known that he was going to split the kingdom and shared his dissatisfaction with Solomon. Here's the question for us. When you seek counsel from people, are we seeking out the advice of people that are discerning and seeking God's face and his voice? Are you listening to people that are going to make you love Jesus more? Are you seeking out the counsel of voices that are going to make you love the poor, the widow, and the orphan more than you do? That are going to make you love your neighbor that's hard to love more? That's going to make you love your kids more, love your spouse more? That when you think about going to seasons of your marriage or a relationship that are challenging, are you confiding and seeking wisdom from people that love you and your spouse equally and will remind you of the vows you made on your wedding day? Are going to say, hey, this is worth fighting for. This is worth fixing. This is worth the effort. Are you surrounding yourself with people who are like, man, if they broke up, think of all the golf we would do. Like, you think about it, does the person actually want what's best for you and your spouse, or do they want what's best for them to have more time with you? I want to make sure that I am seeking the wisdom, and I hope for you, of people that will advocate to draw you and push you closer to God and his ways for you. Rehoboam had a choice to listen to the men that watched his father's demise, that saw the patterns that led to his downfall, and encouraged him to return to the way that his father used to be, the way that the kingdom was, the good way that it used to be. But Rehoboam wasn't looking for a dissenting opinion. He wasn't looking to get challenged. He wasn't looking to actually make a choice that aligned with God. He was actually looking for someone that would help him choose himself. Anyone that knows me knows that I have all the hobbies of a retired person. And I love gardening. I love old stuff. And I love vintage travel trailers. And so one of the things I do in my part-time is I like to restore travel trailers. I think my wife and I have owned like almost 10 of them by now that we've bought and sold. I'm worse at selling than I am at buying. But here's a picture of one of ours. This is our 1950 Royal Spartanette, 35 feet of luxury from 1950. That is the original fridge. That's a Kelvinator, works perfectly. I wouldn't buy, these are the best fridges ever. Original Dixie stove, the floor, I put new vinyl on it, original wood, everything. So this is what we camp in every weekend. I'm leaving here and I'm going back. My kids are Winnie's probably playing LOL Surprise on the dinette right now. And I love restoring these old trailers. And if I wanted to, this is when we brought it home. So we brought it home. I bought it in Invermere. We're the second owners in the 74 years this trailer's been alive. It's not anthropomorphic, existed. And it's got 28 windows, 26 of them open, which is fun until you have to close them all. And it's great. It's like they were built for people returning from the war to go find work. So you tow it around the country and go find somewhere. And it was pretty cool. Don't mind that hole in the bottom there. That's where the furnace was, and there was a lot of asbestos in there. So we're leaving that alone. It was dealt with, but we'll figure that out. Ignore the hole. I'm in like 3 or 4 Facebook groups, because I'm only on Facebook for Facebook groups and Facebook Marketplace now. That's the only reasons I'm there. You can get rid of this picture. It's so distracting. The beauty of all that birch wood is just, smell that photo. what was I gonna say? I'm in like 3 or 4 different Facebook groups. They're combined, there's like 100,000 people in these vintage trailer groups. It's like a whole thing. You can go to the rallies. There's one coming up in Mount Baker, or Linden Fairgrounds called the Mount Baker Trailer Rally the weekend after Labor Day if you wanna go. It's pretty cool. Now I don't go. I go, but I don't bring my trailer because they scrutinize, and I'm not ready for that. My heart's not ready to be scrutinized. But there's 100,000 people in these groups. And if I wanted to, I could spend every social bit of my energy hanging out with people that like old trailers. I could be online talking about old trailers, learning about old trailers, talking stories, sharing tips, talking about like being in communities, hundreds of thousands of people all over the world. You could choose any niche interest that you have, and you can find a group to find community in, okay? And then within that group, you would never need to worry about anything else. You could say, these are my friends, we all like this. The same can be true of church, the same can be true of volleyball, the same can be true of hockey, the same can be true of anything that you are interested in. It is possible for you to find community, but then find community where you never have to leave it. And I think for Rehoboam, and the cautionary tale for each of us, is that if we're not careful, we will only listen to one set of voices. And within that community, we will find even a more niche group of people that really align with us. And if we're not careful, I think we run the risk, and I say for myself that I run the risk of ending up in an echo chamber where no one disagrees with me, that no one's gonna offer me an alternative view of how things should be done. And we all just high five and we say yes to everything. And little do we know, we might be leaving a relational wake. We might be causing hurt, harm. Sports, politics, church, Pokemon, that's real. There's some Pokemon people out there. Boating, Disney, guilty, you name it. If you're passionate about it, interested in it, you can find endless community in your nichest interest. And it's not necessarily reality. And for each of us, this is the challenge. Would we look outside of the familiar spaces, the places that feel the most comfortable, the places that feel most normal, where people tend to agree with us, to enter into spaces and seek wisdom of people that are maybe even within our own community that might disagree with us, that might push us to think deeper, that might push us to ask questions about our actions. It's so easy to be stuck in our echo chambers, just to listen to voices that we agree with. And social media is designed to feed you more of what you're eating. So if you watch one type of video and it slants a certain way, you're just gonna get more of it and more of it and more of it and more of it. And if you click on rage bait and you get mad, it's gonna give you more and more and more and more. And nothing works better for people than keeping them mad. So being aware that you might be inadvertently feeding a monster that is devouring your soul in being online. And if we're not careful, we will never put ourselves around people that say, I think you're wrong. I think you're out of line. How you were wasn't good or right or kind. You didn't love your neighbor well. You didn't love your spouse well. You didn't speak kindly to your children. And if we're not careful, we're going to only surround ourselves with people that say we're doing the right things. The wise elders, the Rehoboam's friends counseled dominance, not discernment, power, not peace, and their immaturity encouraged the king to assert himself and continue dominating, despite knowing that that would be not what God would have. The wise elders counseled gentleness, servitude, humility, honor, and a leadership that is earned and not commanded. Their counsel encouraged the king to humble himself before the others. And the irony is that Rehoboam's father penned this verse, Proverbs 11:14. Without wise leadership, a nation fails. There is safety in having many advisors. Having advisors is one thing. Having wise, prayerful, discerning advisors is another. And this is the one thing I think I love about our church. Our church is marked by having leadership and an elders board that is prayerful, that is reminding us of mission, reminding us of God's purposes, reminding us of our love for Christ and our heart for the city, that we want to share Christ locally, globally, nationally, all those things. That we are within a body that values these things. And I think it's so good. So we know, I spoiled the ending, but the king answered the people harshly. He said, my father scourged you with whips, and I must scourge you with scorpions. Rehoboam had a chance to unite his people, but he chose to divide. And that choice was going to lead to 17 years of really tough leadership for him. Constant problems, a split kingdom, just a constant hassle for him. But God committed to David's lineage, allowed him to stay, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy for him. But what happens if he continued down his father's foolish path? Well, we learned that. A guy that mentored me years ago, his name was Don, and he was awesome. And Don asked this question. He would talk, I've said this before, I think it's been like a decade since I shared it, so I'll share it again. He talked about leadership being like, you're like a tube of toothpaste, right? And he said, the tube of toothpaste, when you go every morning to put it on your toothbrush, you are confident when you do that toothpaste is gonna come out of it. Put it on the brush teeth, it's good. He said, here's the question. When someone looks at you as a Christian, follower of Jesus, for me as a pastor, when you get squeezed, when it's stressful, there's a leadership decision that has to be made, where you are forced to in a moment or in a process, make a hard decision. The question is, what comes out of you? The fruits of the Spirit? Is it kindness? Is it a love of Jesus? Is it a heart for his church? Or is it anger, vitriol, hatred, all of those things? For Rehoboam, he had that people hoped that when he got squeezed by this decision, that what was going to come out was the goodness of his father's leadership. And what came out was everything that they were expecting, unfortunately. That he had been shaped, that you and I are being shaped by the things that we consume. And we might not know it, but in those moments that are heated, those moments that are difficult, those moments where decisions have to be made, that your true self often comes out in those moments. And I hope for you and I hope for myself that when that happens, that no one is surprised at what I say. No one is surprised by how I act. That it would be congruent with the person that I hope to present as, that I want, the follower of Jesus that I desire to be. I tell my students all the time that we would live one life, that the person that you see here is the same person you're gonna see at a campground this afternoon, that you're gonna see at the grocery store, that you're gonna see at the park, that you're gonna see at my kid's school, that this is the same person. There's not multiple versions, there's not a shadow side, any of those things. That sounds exhausting to me that we would do that. And that in the opportunities where we have a chance to show our true character, that we do, and that people are not surprised by what happens. They were so hopeful for Rehoboam that when the time came that he would choose something different, and he didn't. But I'm gonna finish up in just a minute here, but I wanna say this. Even though in Rehoboam's failure, God's purposes were fulfilled, because he said to his father, because of his unfaithfulness to God, he was gonna split the kingdom. And Rehoboam just comes and does the exact same thing, and he splits the kingdom. He said he was gonna do that anyway. And it does not excuse his foolishness, but it reassures us that God keeps his promises even when his people don't. God warned Solomon the consequences of his idolatry, and now that promise was unfolding. Verse 15 says, the king paid no attention to his people. The turn of events was the will of the Lord, for it fulfilled the Lord's message to Jeroboam through the prophet. Where am I here? Sorry, guys. And when all Israel realized that the king had refused to listen to them, they responded, down with the dynasty of David. We have no interest in the son of Jesse. Back to your homes, O Israel. Look out for your own house, O David. These people just said, if he's not going to do what we asked him to do, it's not going to be easy for him to lead. And he had a 17-year run that was marked by conflict, and it could have been marked by flourishing, beauty, amazing leadership, servant-heartedness. His reign lasted, it was fraught with challenge, conflict, and it was never easy. Had he chosen wisdom of the elders, would it have been different? We'll never know. And I don't know about you, I don't want to live with regretful choices or a relational wake of broken lives and hurt. I want to be discerning. I hope for you that you want to be discerning, seeking God and seeking godly people to help you shape my life and my ministry. That we would invite people into the planning that are wise and can suggest things and help us through big decisions. And that we would be slow to speak and quick to listen. Proverbs 12:15 says this, the way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. And I think sometimes God's direction comes through voices we would rather ignore. If you're young, it's your parents. Maybe it's your youth pastor. If you're young, your friends, your mentors. There is advice that sounds difficult to follow, that sounds costly to follow. But would you seek God to say, this is the right choice for me in this season, and this is actually the righteous, upright choice to make? Are you willing to submit to godly wisdom, or like I find myself doing, selectively listen to that affirms my own agenda and thoughts? I'm gonna pray. Worship team, come back up. Lord, would you help us, God? God, we need your Spirit to help us discern what wise counsel is. God, where we are, our ears are prideful, our hearts are prideful, where we're quick with words and we're slow to listen. God, would we surrender to your leadership? God, would you bring wise people around us, voices we've never thought of listening to? And God, would we broaden those around us, the voices that speak into our lives? Would we give people we trust and that trust you authority to shape our lives? And God, what a gift that you sent your son Jesus to be the king that would serve. And while Rehoboam wanted to be a leader that whipped and hurt and harmed his people, you would send your son Jesus that would take the punishment for his people. A good God that loves us, that cares for us, that died for us. And we thank you, God, that you keep your promises. And God, would we be people that constantly seek out wisdom? Would we choose you? Would we choose your ways? Would we choose your truth? Would we choose to follow in your path, even if it's costly, even if it seems silly, or it's going to be less advantageous to us, God? Because we love you, we want to submit to you, we want to surrender to you. Would that be the way we lead, God? We pray this in your name. Amen.